Every punch thrown in this game needs the right backdrop, whether it's the gritty lighting in a scary part of town or the old dilapidated hallway of an apartment building. The environment sets the tone. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain on how I designed the world behind the fights in my game, Back on Your Feet. I always think about two things when going into making a scene. First, obviously, what is the scene supposed to objectively be? As in, is it supposed to be a city, a store, a boxing gym, a bar, etc., etc., etc.? And second, what do I want the player to feel by being in this scene? Now, these are both very broad steps, so let's take a look at how I put them into practice for a couple of scenes in my game. The first scene I want to talk about is where the character the player plays as, Ken, is in the park with one of his friends. The environment itself is supposed to be a park, so grass and plants, which led to me creating a scene with simply a green floor and a handful of trees, which more or less represents something that could be easily interpreted as a park. The second part, what the player is supposed to be feeling in this scene, is completely relaxed. There are probably an infinite number of ways to accomplish this, but let me go through the handful of ways I did it. First, a park is already a pretty relaxing place. It was no coincidence that the environment I chose for this scene was one. The player's good friend is there waiting for him, sipping a beer. Upon interacting with the friend, the player is informed that said friend has a cooler of beer and is wondering if you'd like to hang out a while. Drinking a cold drink with a friend during a nice day, I personally find to be considerably relaxing, and I think people would tend to agree. Additionally, one of your friends in the game's dog is present who is wagging their tail, and lastly, a chill park ambiance with birds chirping is looping in the background. In no way here am I telling the player directly that they should be feeling relaxed or peaceful, but they likely do considering all the things I have set up to make them feel that way. Next, let's look at two scenes that coexist right next to each other, an apartment room and an apartment hallway. The apartment room was actually the first scene I ever designed for Back on Your Feet, and I did so like 2 whole years ago, so my pixel art skills weren't what they are today necessarily, but I think the core concepts still apply. Now, this apartment room was supposed to just have the bare minimum, because in the story the player's character has just moved in and did not come with much. This led to me drawing the room with just a small bed, a dresser with a lamp, one window, and a bathroom with just the essentials. You may notice in this scene that there are marks, cracks, and things of that nature throughout the art, but let's hold off on addressing that until we see the other scene, the apartment hallway, as well. When making the apartment hallway, I focused on the bare essentials that make something an apartment hallway, which I believe to be apartment doors, some light, and an exit. I decided to add details such as a vending machine and an exit sign so that the hallway felt a little less empty and repetitive. Once again, you can notice some of the cracks and grime that was present in the apartment room scene. Okay, now let's take a look at how I went about making the player feel how I wanted them to feel in this case. First, let me give you a little context as to what the player knows going into these scenes. These environments are basically the very first scenes the player sees the character Ken in. Additionally, the player knows that Ken just moved in and lives alone due to some intro dialogue. What I wanted the player to feel here is that they are, or rather Ken is, down on his luck. My idea was that making the apartment run down, filled with marks and something not taken care of, all begs the question, why would anyone move here? And I think the first answer people will go to is Ken must have had no choice. Financially, he has to live here. Then, as the player slowly gains an insight into Ken's past and understands he used to be an extremely successful pro boxer, they will begin to ask the question, how could someone so successful end up in a place like this? I'm pretty sure when designing this scene I had just watched Southpaw, so I took a lot of inspiration from the small apartment Billy Hope stayed in at one point during the movie. Billy used to have money, has fame, but is reduced to living in an old, rundown apartment, all due to an insane tragedy and the events that followed. Basically, I'm alluding to the idea that for someone like Ken to be living in a place like this, he must be down on his luck. I won't give away more of Back on Your Feet's story because I want people to experience these things for themselves in the game. Moving on, the last scene I would like to discuss is a scene called Pepper's Bar. The scene is supposed to be a big bar in an unknown city, so this is what I made it look like. Now, how is the player supposed to feel at this point? Without giving away the story at this point in the game, I will say that this scene is supposed to be somewhat scary, make the player feel somewhat alone, and remind the player they are somewhere they are not supposed to be. More or less, this environment checks all of these boxes. This is firstly done with one of my favorite tools to convey a mood: lighting. The scene takes place at night, and the only source of light stems from the bar's red flickering sign and a couple of streetlights. Next, to make the player feel alone, the bar is isolated, being the only building on its block. In regard to making the player know they shouldn't be here, the roads surrounding the bar seem to not be taken care of as much in comparison to what the player is used to seeing. Additionally, when attempting to interact with the door and enter the bar, the player is notified that the door is locked, which is acknowledged to be unusual for a bar at this hour. This simple setup, along with little details like a dumpster and barbed fence behind the bar, set the vibe exactly how I want it. There are tons of different ways to go about making scenes for games. This is just how I've been doing it for my game, and so far I've found success with it. Once again, consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Please go wishlist Back on Your Feet if you are at all interested, as I am planning on releasing the game this summer, and thanks so much for watching.